Alrighty, well here we are back at the system at the end of our total solar day on the 24th. Now usually I end this week on the 22nd, but obviously we were still on our way back from our trip to Minnesota. And that all went well. Prior to departing though, I was thinking about, oh well, I'm going to leave 2 of the power walls off, and then, oh well, maybe I'll leave 3 off, that way it'll be half. Well, one of the things I started to think of is, oh, well, you know, if the situation comes again where we get into high heat and we run a lot of AC, I don't want to have my mom sweltering in the house, obviously, and so then it's like, oh, well, I get into a situation where the batteries are going to run depleted and there's really nothing I can do as far as opening windows or anything of that in the evening. And so I thought, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and run this experiment later on when I get back, and that's what we'll do. We'll run this little test in August and kind of see where we're at with that. But with that, let's go ahead and head back over to the studio and take a look at how the week went. We'll look a little bit about operating the system remotely, and then also about how many miles we put on the car while we were on our trip. And then later on this week I'll follow that up with a little special video on the trip itself. But let's get back over to the studio and go over this extended week. Wow, what a week! Well, grab yourselves a tasty beverage and let's get to it. This is going to be a little bit longer overview than some. We're going to be going over some of what occurred while we were on the road. So, as you'll see in a later video, we just came back from a 4,064 mile road trip in 6 days. I like driving and I loved the company, but it's sure nice to be home. So let's get into this. We have a couple additional days to cover because we were still traveling on the 22nd when I usually close this. So this will actually run until the 24th. So let's start off with the 15th where we left off. And the 15th started off pretty normally, but I did notice the temperatures were starting to creep up a little bit, but it wasn't a huge issue. And to be honest, my thoughts were mostly on the preparation for the trip. So we had decent production for the day, just under 60 kilowatt hours. We started the day at 18%, the system charge peaking out at 52% there before we ended the day at 28 due to that 14 kilowatt hours that we put to the car. And that gave a slight deficit for the day, but not too bad. Let's look at that for just a second. There wasn't much driving done that day, obviously. And so then here are the notes. Again, we'll be quick about the 15th because you've already seen this really. And then showing the notation there, elevated temperatures, slight increase in the AC use that drove the home use up a little bit. Other than that, you just try to keep the car charged enough so that topping it off won't be an issue when we leave. And here is the 16th. Also slightly elevated temperatures, decent production at 58.4 kilowatt hours and ending the day there at 51%. And I was really focused on vehicle prep for the trip, so there wasn't a lot of driving done today, only 10 kilowatt hours put to the car. And it's interesting that both the total production for the day and the raw home usage track really smoothly with that exterior temperature as it rises and falls. We'll see that demonstrated as we look at some of the further days in this week. But at a glance, I can already see that this day was in the mid to high 90s just by looking at those 2 data points alone, and knowing that it was a sunny day, so that any degradation isn't going to come from clouds. And so then here we have the notes. And because we were leaving very early in the next morning, I needed a 100% charge for a scheduled departure time of 5 a.m. And so I ran the charge past midnight, so you'll see that that's the 10 kilowatt hours shown is what was sent to the car prior to midnight. And then there's an additional 20 kilowatt hours that appears the following day on the 17th. And so then here's the 17th. And of note here is that it got to 100%, and I had depleted the system. So that meant that the home from about 3 a.m. to 6:45 a.m. was running on full or partial grid power. And this brought our grid use for the day up to that 4.1 kilowatts that you see there. And unfortunately, this was unavoidable. We had to make our departure time, and that became more critical than not drawing anything from the grid. But it was a decent day of production, like you see there, 58.1 kilowatt hours. We managed to get 31% of system recovery by the end of total solar day, even though we'd completely depleted the system in the morning. And so then that got us through the evening, so that's fine. And then cooking, laundry, and heavy AC use during the day contributed to that elevated home use. And so even without the 20 kilowatt hours of vehicle charge, we still used 50.3 kilowatt hours to the home. And so here are the notes. And again, so the notation here is that I decided to move forward with the vehicle charge, right? So I made the decision to simply return when we come back with about the same level of charge that I left with, and then to call it a wash and just resume from this point upon our return. And so that was the cleanest way that I could think of to do it. So I'll present both numbers when we do our monthly closeout to show how many miles were driven on sunlight and then how many miles were driven in supercharging and other sources. And a little after 6 in the morning, we were away. And so this is a very heavy push of driving for the day, as you can see on there. Again, we will put a special video specifically about the road trip, but on this day we knew that we had to press into Wyoming in order to make our schedule, and that's what we did. And so on the 18th, even with a couple of nap stops the previous day, we realized that 1,000 miles was a bit much, and so our goal this day was kind of tamped down. We wanted to make it to Sioux Falls and then take a room for the night. So 730 miles was still a long haul, so that was a respectable daily mile crunch there, but that was nice. And so again, while we were away, I was able to record remotely what the system was doing, and what we see here, we opened the day at 10%. We had a decent day of production, 58.8 kilowatt hours. Weather was cooling off a little bit, and so then you can see that the AC was tamped down a little bit from the day before, but it still put the total home use at 37.7 kilowatt hours. And so without the vehicle there, we ended the day at 51% of system charge, and that was after adding a total of 21.7 kilowatt hours to the system. That's once you subtract that 14.2 kilowatt hours of usage from the power wall. And then here we have the notes, and as noted, I'm not going to be showing the start of day miles and all of that necessarily. I'll put it in, you'll see that they're loaded in there, but obviously it's irrelevant since we are doing all of our charging predominantly from supercharging at this point. But basically we tried to start each day at 100% charge, and that wasn't always possible or practical. If we stayed someplace overnight, you don't want to leave the car charged overnight. When we had a supercharger available to us, we'd bump the charge up to 100%. But other than that, leaving it 90% in the morning was just fine. That didn't really slow us down all that much at all. And so on the 19th, 242 miles there represented our final kind of easy press to where we would be staying with family for the weekend there. And it was an easy drive from Sioux Falls to the destination. And then, as you can see, the home had a good production day, nearly 60 kilowatt hours, brought the total solar day percentage to 81%, and that's in spite of it being a little bit cloudy. We have slightly over 30 kilowatt hour gain to the system, And the notes, again, like I said, short drive and cloudy conditions at the Energy Sovereignty Project home. So you'll notice that we have also added a green charging icon to the top of this page. And so this is because we did our charging using an adapter to an old style plug that they had that they used to plug their generator in. And so this was our charging arrangement at the home. I'll pull this up here so you can see that real quick. And then what I'll do also is I'm going to leave a link to the adapter that we used in the description. I wanted to wait until I made sure that that it worked, and so that might be helpful to some of you who charge remotely. And so then on the 20th, that was the day that the reunion took place, and so that mileage represents driving to and from that. And a few errands, cooler temperatures at the Energy Sovereignty Project home, and that was evidenced there by also the not only the greater production for the day, but also the reduced home consumption. The production at just over 60 kilowatt hours, and then the use of the home at only 22.8 kilowatt hours. And so that resulted in the system peaking out a little after noon and then sending 15 kilowatt hours to the grid. And that'll help us, kind of knock down that yearly deficit that we have since we're using net metering. And the notes, again, the mileage represents the driving to the reunion event and a few errands. And then the charging from the home plug again. This plug was able to get us a charge rate of about 32 miles an hour, so that was perfect for our local driving needs. And I was very pleased that I didn't have to seek out an alternative local charging method. The nearest supercharger to us was about 15 miles away. It's still doable, but nowhere near as convenient as just charging right at the home. And then on the 22nd, or excuse me, the 21st, and again, the 320 miles shown here represents our decision to leave that evening. This was a Sunday, and we learned from our trip out that we needed to include a third kind of easy day in order to be able to make it back on schedule, as we both needed to get back to work there. So, but as to the home, you can see here that because we ended at 100% the previous day, we started out at 89%. And that meant that by 11 a.m. we were already exporting to the grid, and by total solar day we'd actually sent 30 kilowatt hours to the grid, even with a slightly reduced production from the cloudy weather that we were having. And the clouds are mostly upper level, but it still reduced our total output by about 5 kilowatt hours or so. And but with that said, it also resulted in cooler weather, so there was less AC use. So it's a good trade-off. And then the notes, and basically that we ended the first short hop in Owakoma, South Dakota. Very pretty place, but man, the mosquitoes were off the hook. A lot of wetlands and a river right there. Let's look at that for just a second. And so then on the 22nd, big push day as far as driving went. Another day of nearly 1,000 miles of driving, and it's much like our first day of our trip when we were heading out, but neither one of us wanted to end our trip with a push, so this was a good day to do that. So we pressed on so that we'd be able to arrive home at a decent hour the next day. So and then as to the home, again, we ended the previous day at 100%, so again we began this day in the 80s, in the 80% region there. Good production, but as you can see, the heat rose up just a little bit, came up over a little bit over 100 degrees, and the home usage was driven to nearly 50 kilowatt hours. And then this resulted in the available power to the grid at just 14.3 kilowatt hours. But the good news there is that it did still leave the system at 100% total, so that would mean that we'd have full batteries to come home to. So as it turned out, I'll talk about that a little bit later here, but turned out I'd actually need that extra charge. So here's the notes. Again, not too much to add there to what I just said, but vehicle data is concerned there. We're still supercharging. And so let's get right to the 23rd. And easy day home as far as driving. We left from just outside Salt Lake City, so not too bad there. Day, as far as the home is concerned, the day started at 74% due to that overnight AC use, kind of increasing slightly the overnight use with the still air and everything. And the system was still able to recover pretty quickly to 100% by around 1 p.m. and was still able to pound a little bit out to the grid. We got 9.3 kilowatt hours out to the grid, and production at 58.8 kilowatt hours, so not bad. And then the notes, and as noted, we took our final supercharger session and then returned home. And then what isn't shown here is that after arriving home, when I went to the studio to prepare for this weekly update, I charged the car there to 90%, and like I said earlier, this was the best way that I could think of to true up what we had. So then basically, when I left on the trip, the car wasn't 100%. Makes no difference. And then we would then resume also with the car nearly fully charged. And so then we would just record what we did on supercharger miles, and then just resume here back as showing our sunlight miles. That was the cleanest way that I could come up with to do it. And so here we have the 24th. And so this was an interesting day. So my partner in this madcap adventure, Stephanie, she had forgotten her computer in the front trunk and needed it for work. And so wound up doing a emergency computer delivery. So hopped back in the car there after topping it off in the morning with a couple kilowatt hours of charge, and then made the round trip to the Bay Area. And it was a good thing, you know, the system was at 100%, so I had the available power to do that. And then upon returning home, I drew the system down a bit and needed to put some charge right back into the car, and so that's where that 22 kilowatt hours came from. I think I put like 2 kilowatt hours to top the car off before I left, and then 20 kilowatt hours when I had returned. And so here's the notes, and again, basically that. Let you look at that for a minute. And this shows the vehicle miles available, all of that. That was basically the 23 miles and 8%. That represented our charge when we returned back from the Bay Area. And then we wound up putting 22 kilowatt hours back to the car, and representing that here. And so that brings us to a close. And sorry for the slightly extended video length here, but we had a couple extra days to tack on since we were still traveling. And I hope you found that fun. You know, again, you know, we'll be putting up a video about the road trip specifically in a day or two, and there's some insights there that some of you guys might find interesting. But as always, you know, best of luck with your own systems. And I did a video of Tomas's install, and so look for that over the course of the next few days. Fantastic job, beautiful looking system, and so we'll have that up in our subscriber systems update. And so until next time, thanks for joining in, and we'll see you soon.